Hey, there I am. I know. You know, I haven't done a live stream in so long, I forgot how to work the stupid thing, but I've got it figured out now.
That's not the best thing.
I actually have a cameraman who's not doing a very good job. See, now she's talking behind the camera, which makes it even worse. This, of all my live streams, and some of them have been pretty bad, this may be the worst already. We've just started. Oh my gosh, was anybody else watching that Blazer game tonight? Ugh! 40 points down in the third quarter. That was it. I couldn't take it anymore. I turned it off and I said, I'm going to draw. And I said, if I'm going to draw, I might as well. And I'm getting booed from the audience. I said, if I'm going to draw, I might as well do it live, right? Share my pain. Thank you. I need a laugh track too. Okay.
I'm not saying that's the one.
Yeah. Damien Hellstrom says, welcome back. Thank you. I'm glad to be back. What a night. What a night. It hasn't even started yet. Okay. Here we go. And look at this. I have my Nebraska shirt on. Oh, their season got canceled too. I'm just going to turn the camera off and go to bed. No, I'm going to draw. But first, let me show you some product. And I'm not talking about hair product because I don't have any hair. Look at this. This is my wonderful, beautiful hardcover sketchbook called Raw Imagination. It's 20 years of sketches. Not 1 year of sketches, not 10 years, 20 years of sketches. Is this camera? Ah, there we go. So anyway, if you don't have one of these babies are 25 bucks, signed and numbered limited edition, or you can get one with a head sketch in it for 40 bucks. Well, that's not true. It's 45, but I was close. $45 with the head sketch. And then $5 shipping. It's such an amazing deal. I might as well be giving them away, really, right? Anyway, if you don't have one of these, check it out. You can email me. You can message me on Facebook, Twitter, whatever. I highly recommend it. Mainly because I did it. And, you know, why wouldn't I recommend it? You can tell the depression and angst. That's why you shouldn't be a sports fan. You should just never be a sports fan, and you know, be much happier. Anyway, I just finished up my run on Justice League, which some of you may or may not be aware of. I hope you're aware of the fact that I'm drawing Justice League, and that you picked up issues 48, 49, and 50. 50, of course, being a double-sized extravaganza. And then I just finished the Justice League Annual #2, which I really hope you pick up. I assume it's coming out probably October. Your guess is as good as mine, but I hope you pick it up when it comes out. Anyway, I just finished that up, so I really don't have anything to do right now. So I thought, you know what, time to get caught up on commissions and sketches. And, okay, so when you go to a couple of grocery stores here locally, they were giving away these little, here, give me one of those.
It's Pumbaa.
Okay. So if you can see this. This is Pumbaa,
Yeah.
You know, right? From Lion King, right? And they have suction cup things, you can like stick them to stuff, right? And so they're giving these away. Every time you spent like $30 worth of groceries, they'd give you one of these in a closed package. So you had no idea which one you were getting. Okay. So I got, I grocery shop quite a bit. So we got a bunch of these. And the deal was, if you got a gold Mickey, right? A gold Mickey Mouse, it was worth $100 off your next grocery purchase, which I was like, I'm going for that, man. So we were collecting these things and just, oh my gosh, we've got probably 50 of them and never got a gold Mickey, of course. And the promotion's over. But now I've got all these little rubbery suction cuppy Disney things laying around the house. And my daughter, who I want you to know is not like 6, she's 18, is going around like putting them in she covered the toilet with them, for example. Then you got to move everything before you can use the toilet. She's putting them in my 89-year-old mother who lives with us, sticks them in her bathroom all over her mirror in her bathroom. I mean, this is the kind of hijinks that goes on in this house. So now we have all these stupid little suction cup things, and I can't get rid of them. And she's like destroying one of my toy shelves right now with them. All seeking a gold Mickey, and I never got it. But so now I got these crazy things all over the house, courtesy of my daughter, who continues to hide them in plain sight.
You gotta do something with them.
Amen, sister. Okay, let's see who's with us. Louis Bright Raven's here. Not a baseball fan, but I feel your pain. Oh, not a basketball fan, right? But I feel your pain. Well, there's a lot of pain right now. Not that I expected him to win, but still, getting blown out by 40 in the third quarter. It's like, gee, man, at least show up. What's Aaron, by the way? I've avoided all those silly Disney basketball playoffs. Well, they've actually been better than you would have expected. With the fake crowd and everything, they're actually more entertaining than I would have guessed they would be. Of course, when you're getting beat by 40 points, that's the entertainment value goes way down quickly. Let's see. Andrew J is here. Aaron Con forever. Hey, man, thanks for joining me. Have you woken up with a bunch of stuck to your head yet? She filled my entire pillow with them. And they must have been, I don't know, sunk down in or something. So it wasn't until like 2 a.m. when I tried to fluff my pillow and laid my head back down. It was like, what the heck is in my pillow? And it was all these rubber heads of these Disney characters. That was brutal. I mean, at 2 a.m., it's not what you want to be. That's not what you want to be waking up to in the middle of the night.
Good idea, though.
Oh, Jeff, is it Broshammer? Says, hi, Sixers. Yeah, well, okay. Sixers are, yeah. Okay. At least Blazers got one game. So, all right. Well, enough of this idle prattle. Let's get to work, shall we?
Woo!
I can sit here and talk about sports misery forever, but that's not why you came. That's not why you came to hear me talk about that. But you probably came to see me draw on this Wonder Woman Conan cover.
Woo!
Now, this is for a guy who lives in actually Lincoln, Nebraska, hometown of my Huskers, but he's a Michigan fan. Very odd. But so anyway, he sent this to me and said, hey, man, can you do like Wonder Woman and Conan on the cover? Okay, first of all, I hate sketch covers because they're so small and kind of hard to work. You can't really do anything big and cool. Well, you can do cool stuff, but it's smaller and it's harder, because you're working around the logo and stuff, although this has a small logo. But anyway, and then I usually would not do 2 characters, and, but the sucker I am, he talked me into it. So I'm doing 2 characters on here. And so we'll see how this turns out. Oh, hey, this just reminded me. This looks like, check this out. This looks like Brian Hitch doing a Snickers commercial or ad with the Flash. I just did a 2-page Snickers ad, which Norm Rapman inked. Turned out very well, featuring the Shazam family, or the Marvel family, as it was called before they lost the copyright. So I'm kind of excited for that to come out. I don't know when it does, but I'm going to be looking forward to that. I really want to do a Hostess fruit pie ad like they had in the 70s when I was growing up. Anyway, so, if you haven't checked out this Wonder Woman Conan, that's not my cover, that's Derek Robertson, but in the first issue here, it's a nice story by Gail Simone, very surprisingly good. Not that because Gail wrote it that I'm saying it's surprisingly good, but I'm saying that with a Wonder Woman Conan team up, you're most likely thinking what I thought when I was offered the job. Okay, that's absurd. This is going to blow. Then I found out Gail was writing it, and Gail and I, of course, worked together on Wonder Woman for 2 years, and we did a whole fantasy barbarian storyline to launch that series. And it was really, really good. So I thought, you know what? If anybody can pull this off, Gail can pull it off. And she did. It's quite good. But there's, there's fun, love, and Conan action. It was a 6-issue miniseries. It is now in trade, hardcover, believe it or not. It's been out for a while. But if you have not read this, there's a double-page spread featuring Conan the Barbarian. If you have not read this, you should check out the trade. There's another double-pager with Wonder Woman and some barbarians in the arena. I'm really proud of how it turned out. This is my kind of thing, fantasy work and such. So I'm going to switch my banner off here because I'm covering up too much. There we go. Oh man, everybody's jumping in now. We have got a party environment. Let's see.
How many people?
Well, I don't know. There's 15 people watching at the present time, but there's tons of people commenting. Johnny Fitz says, yo, hope you've been well. I have, Johnny. Thanks for asking. I hope you as well. Nighthawk Warrior is here. Andrew Lukanov. Boy, that sounds ethnic. I love it. Andre. That sounds very Russian. Sweet. You're always fun. It's great. Thanks for dropping in. JD Korea. I'm finally getting Bart Sears to warm up to blank covers, Aaron. That was probably a lot of work, getting Bart going on something like that. Let's see. Humphrey Bear is here because he never left. Comics Legend says, Aaron, when is the first day of class? When do we start the Lopresti Ultimate Comic Art course? Well, if I don't get another assignment here pretty soon, next week, I don't know. We'll see. I've got. Oh, that reminds me. I have been discussing getting the Garbage Man, all 120 pages that was released through DC, the various miniseries that was in at DC several years ago. Getting all that stuff packaged in a trade paperback. It'll have the new pages because I have to take Batman out and put in my own characters to replace him in the story, since it's, that DC reverted the rights to me. Obviously, I don't have the rights to use Batman. So although there may not be anybody over there to keep me from doing it now. I don't know. But no, I'm going to I'm in the process actually of redrawing the Batman stuff. And I am talking with Dark Horse right now, and it's starting to sound promising, but nothing's been finalized yet. But hopefully, I'll have an announcement soon about that, going forward. So at least I can get the Garbage Man material collected in a trade paperback, so that everybody has access to it. So that when I get around to actually being able to do some new stories, if anybody comes in late, they'll be able to pick up the trade and read about it and get caught up. So that's kind of my goal. I sort of have to get that stuff traded before I'm going to move forward with any new stuff. So that looks promising. I'll keep you posted on that. Also, looking at some crowdfunding options here, probably with Kit Carter in the very near future. I know if I'm going to do it, I got to get it launched in September, or it'll be too late in the year to do it. And then get too close to Christmas time and people hang on to their money a little bit tighter. So anyway, this has been fun. Great conversation and all, but okay, finally, let's roll. Hey. I may have to turn off my autofocus because I always forget to turn it off. Okay, it's off. All right. So you can see I've started roughing a little bit of the image on there, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to go live and do this. Josh Gormley says, dude, the Blazers looked hot going into the playoffs. Now he's crying. Yeah, well, I think maybe they played their best basketball before they actually got into the playoffs, just to get into the playoffs. And of course, they're also playing the Lakers, and they just don't have anybody to guard either LeBron or Anthony Davis. So they're kind of at a huge disadvantage there. And so anyway, enough of that. Okay, so I'm going to, I guess if you send me a sketch cover, you're not particularly worried about the condition it comes back in, because especially if I have to do it on a double pager, sort of like this, that I've got to open it up and flatten it out. So I'll try to keep it, being a collector myself, I like to respect the condition of the comic, but I do have to draw on it. So, it's kind of hard to keep it in near mint condition when I'm drawing all over it, which, seems like that should make it worth less money with someone drawing on it, right? I gotta get this camera in the right spot. There we go. That's better. Look at that perspective on that cable going right up to the camera. It's like a comic book panel. If you're going to draw a cable in a comic book panel, which I hope you wouldn't do, because that would be kind of boring unless you put something else in the panel. All right, so we got Wonder Woman. Anybody out there other than me missing comic conventions? I mean, I hate traveling now. I used to love it when I was younger. Now I'm like just kind of an old grumpy dude. My daughter will confirm that. So I don't like traveling as much as I used to, but man, I do miss going to comic book shows. I really do. Or multimedia shows, because they're hardly comic book shows anymore. Yeah, I think maybe I'll do maybe a better job of blocking this in here first before I get too carried away and detailing everything up. J.D. Correa says, Aaron, I've been assisting Dave Dorman, Bart Sears, and a few other artists with their sketch ops. If you ever need help, let me know, brother. Their sketch, what do you mean? You have to like give me a little more details. I'm not sure what you mean with their sketch ops. I mean, I assume operations, but I don't know what a sketch operation is. People email me and I do sketches. That's my operation. Maybe they've got something a little bit more involved and grandiose than I am shooting for. I don't know. But thank you for the offer. What I really need is somebody to cut cardboard and mail this stuff. That is the real pain in the butt of doing this stuff, is mailing it out. I'm really kind of ticked because in all the years I've been doing this, I have never had any artwork damaged, and that just happened for the first time at the post office. I don't know, I think I do an exceptional job of packaging artwork. I take quite a bit of pride in it, quite frankly. And they bent this. It was a 11 by 17, and they bent it in half. The post office did somehow, and so there was a crease down the middle of the artwork, and I was not very happy. But I had a very gracious client, I guess you'd call him, patron, customer, who said that, once he put it in the frame, you couldn't even see it, the crease. And I was like, no, I got to do you a new one. He's like, no, don't do me a new one. This one's fine. And so I don't know. I got to do something, kind of send him a little extra something here when I get a few spare moments, because that really stinks. You don't pay good money for a piece of artwork and then it gets trashed in the mail, despite my rather detailed efforts to keep it from getting crushed. For those of you who have actually read this comic, you'll know that Wonder Woman is not really in her costume through the whole thing. She's kind of in a barbarian version. And I don't think I'm going to draw her in. I think I'm going to draw her in her regular Wonder Woman outfit, because that's the funny thing. It's like whenever you're doing a cover for a book, it doesn't matter what's going on inside, right? I drew her in her costume on the cover of every single issue. And then she was never in her costume in the entire series. But you want people to buy the book, right? So you put false advertising on the cover. And I always thought that was funny. I remember when Bruce Jones was writing the Hulk as kind of a horror comic, and that was back in the early 2000s. It had kind of a short Renaissance run there where people were sort of really into the Hulk again, and it was before Planet Hulk. And I remember the Hulk was hardly in any issues, because I'd keep picking him up because I kept hearing really good things about the series. And I'd pick up an issue and flip through it, and there was like no Hulk in it. It was just all dark and spooky looking, but there was no Hulk. And I'm like, well, I'm not buying this book if the Hulk isn't in it. But the Hulk was on every cover, you know. So I always thought that was funny that the publishers knew enough to put the Hulk on the cover because they obviously wanted people to buy the book, but then they wouldn't insist on him actually being in the comic. So I don't know. I mean, if they know that the book sells with the character on the cover, then why don't they think it's important to put the character actually in the book as well? But like I said, I never read the Bruce Jones stuff, and I heard it was good, but I don't know. I mean, it's like, you know, if you're going to write a horror comic, then go write House of Mystery. Why write the Hulk as a horror comic where the Hulk doesn't appear? It's all Bruce Banner. I don't know. But again, like I said, I didn't read it, so I shouldn't be too critical, which I don't mean to be. But Aaron, if you were to teach, what would be one of your first lessons? Would be not to become a comic book artist. No, I'm kidding. My first lesson would be perspective, right? If you can't do perspective, man, you might as well forget it. And then second would be figure drawing. Although perspective would be probably more than one. Well, maybe not. I don't want to bore people. I was going to say it could be more than one video, but that's like, my wife's a math teacher, so I better be careful what I say here. But that's like, you know, doing a whole video on calculus or something. You know, it's, you want to keep people a little bit interested, but you know, definitely be perspective. But I think the important thing is, especially when dealing with the perspective, is not necessarily going through every tiny aspect of it, but sort of the essentials, and then kind of how to incorporate those into your work effectively and efficiently. Because perspective can get pretty deep into the weeds, and I hate it, quite frankly. That's why I'm not digging what I'm doing with Conan's face here. I can tell you that right now. I try to, you know, well, admittedly, I shortcut perspective as much as I possibly can because it's so much extra work. But sometimes you just can't avoid it, you know, when you're, especially when you're doing a cityscape or something like that. But there's tricks to eyeballing it so that you can, gosh, why didn't I? There's tricks to eyeballing it so you don't have to spend hours and hours, you know, on a single panel setting up your perspective grid. Johnny Fitz says garbage man. That's a poignant question. You must have tuned in just after I mentioned that. I am speaking with Dark Horse right now about collecting the existing material in a trade. Hopefully that will work out. It's certainly not a done deal yet, but hoping that it works out. And that will allow me to hopefully move forward with some newer stories in the not too distant future. But we'll have to see. But that's my immediate plans right now. As I'm trying to get those Batman pages redrawn and replaced, and then have hopefully Dark Horse or some other publisher put it together for me so we can get it out there in trade paperback and available to whoever wants to read that stuff and get caught up, and then will have resource material for backstory when I do new material. Because I didn't want to do new stories without the older stuff being accessible. Because you always will get people that, will jump in on a new series or story or something, go, oh, this is great, where can I read more? And you're like, oh, well, you can't because it's not published anyplace. But so I want to make sure that original stuff gets out. So I hope that answers your question. Let me pop this up here. Nighthawk Warrior wants to know, Aaron, do you plan to do more videos like the page of Garbage Man where you did Night of the Living Jed video series? Yes, I do. It's interesting. I seem to get more eyeballs when I do live feeds than when I do those basically videos, process videos where they're edited and they take 10 times more effort to put together than something like this. And yet I always get more people watching this stuff. So, but I just have not had time because of, a lot of the guys that are doing all the YouTube stuff and the crowdfunding, I mean, they're pretty much doing it full time. And I have not been. I've been, still actively doing stuff in mainstream comics. And so I don't have as much time to devote to that stuff as some of these other guys do who have decided to go all in. And I may not be far behind them, quite frankly. I mean, like I said, we'll see how things play out. But I do have some more time right now, obviously, because I don't have anything going on through DC or Marvel at the present. So I'm going to try and do, I got to do another Kit Carter strip. And I'd like to process video that. So that would probably be the next thing that I'm looking at doing. Conan. I used to hate Conan. Well, that's not true. I didn't hate Conan when I was a kid, but I was a big King Cole fan. And I loved Solomon Kane. And Conan was my least favorite of the Barbarian books. But after I did this with Gale, of course, and then I did an 8-page Conan story in Dark Horse Presents number, I want to say 24. I actually did the cover, has a nice Conan cover on it, and I did an 8-page story that Matt Banning inked and that I wrote, and it was really fun, actually. And so I sort of getting into Conan now, where I was never really a big fan. I would still, if I had my druthers, that's an old person word. But if I had my druthers, I would do a King Cole story, because I always liked the idea that he was this kind of barbarian figure that was a king. So he actually, Conan has, some morals, I suppose, but, he's a thief by trade. He's a barbarian. And Cole sort of had to regulate his barbarian tendencies because he's trying to rule the people. And I always thought that was an interesting, what should we say, character struggle that he had to deal with. Yeah, what do I want to do with this sword? So, I'm I'm gonna go partial barbarian, I think, on Wonder Woman here. Kind of have a little tattered loincloth kind of look instead of a regular trousers or whatever you want to call them, booty shorts. It's kind of funny that, of course, when everybody first saw the Conan Wonder Woman team up book, they're like, Wonder Woman would kick Conan's butt, inside of 5 seconds. You're like, it's true. So Gale stripped Wonder Woman of her powers temporarily. And so it actually worked out pretty well. Because they did fight in the arena at the very first issue, and it became sort of fugitives together. It's a really nice story. There's some nice moments in it. You never know if these things are going to turn out. So I'm always apprehensive I like doing these live feeds, but when I actually sit down and start, thinking seriously about doing one, I'm like, oh, do I really want to draw on camera? What if I screw it up? Of course, you guys know by now I screw most of them up before I get to a finished product anyway. So, but I like to sort of have a clearer idea of what I'm going to do before I do it. But I figured, what the heck, right? We'll just go for it. And so far, so good. Let's see what else is going on here. Whew! Excuse me. That was not a COVID sneeze.
Or was it?
I got comments coming from the Peanut Gallery over here. Nighthawk Warrior says, so Aaron, did you finish up your DC work? Are you still working for DC? I'm not at this moment. There's obviously some unrest over there at the moment, and a lot of I think trying to figure out what their next move is and what they're doing, what their publishing plan is, and those type of things. So so something I was gonna work on, it might still happen in September. We'll see. Time will tell. But I just was working on a layout for a Pirates of the Caribbean movie poster. Those of you, I hope, have seen my Jaws print poster that I did. And I kind of wanted to do a Pirates one. So I'm working on that. I also want to do The Thing, even though everybody's done The Thing 100 times. I love that movie. So but right now my main focus has got to be getting commissions done, because I took quite a few on waiting list from the last Aaron Con that I just didn't get to. So I've got some time. I need to get those done for the folks. Even though I don't take money up front until I start your commission, because I don't want to be one of those guys who takes money and then 6 months later you still haven't seen the commission, or in some cases 6 years later. I'm not that guy. So I wait until I'm actually able to start it before I collect. And that way you usually get your commission within a week or two. So I have people on a list, but I have not taken their money yet. So I'm not like feeling guilty or pressed that somehow I, ripping these people off, but I do want to, put them on the list. I got time, so I need to do them. You can see where this is sort of coming together. Now, StreamYard, who I produce these videos through, that's the software I use. They're now offering a high def. It's going to cost me more a month to do so, but I may, because this low def stuff when you're doing artwork is just for the birds, as they say, or at least I say. And so I may have to cough up the extra bucks per month to get that high def, so when I do these, you guys can actually see clearly what I'm working on. Although it may be to my advantage that you can't see clearly what I'm working on. Go, wow, that looks great, but I can't really see it. And go, yes, and keep believing that it's great. My wife's wandering around back there. My daughter, there's a lot of action going on in the house tonight.
Happening twice. Hi, boo-boo.
That wasn't directed at me. That was my wife talking to her puppy.
Hi, boo-boo. Hello, boo-boo. Oh, big boy. Big boy.
You get all sorts of content when you watch my videos. Have I checked out DC's fandom? No. I have not. I saw some of the videos they dropped from the movies and stuff and watched those, but I didn't really, wasn't really involved in that. Comics Legends says, I loved Mahmoud Azra's Conan series. Yeah, that was good stuff. Although I have to say, I didn't like the story. Not that the story wasn't good, but I was more interested in the witch storyline. And we kept getting flashbacks every issue, like really stretching the story out beyond where I thought it needed to be stretched to. Not that the flashback stories were not good in and of themselves. They were, but I really felt like I was being drug along a little bit too much to get to the point. So in fact, I didn't even finish it. I get bored really easy. So if you don't pay something off for me within a reasonable amount of time, I kind of lose interest. I do have the issues, but I haven't read it yet, the conclusion of that storyline. I did surprisingly, and I think I've said this before, I know I've said this before, I like Savage Avengers. I thought it would be really stupid, but it really wasn't. It was actually really good. And so I read the first 5 issues of that. And where I left off with that, Conan and Punisher were kind of hiking off together across the Savage Land. I thought that in and of itself was worth reading, but I haven't picked up any issues beyond 5 yet. So I will need to catch up on that a little bit too, but I got a screenplay I got to read this weekend because someone wants me to do some, what would you call it, promotional work attached to their screenplay. They're trying to get sold, so I got to read that. I'm supposed to read that this weekend and didn't do it yet. So yeah, I got all sorts of things that I can and probably should be doing that I'm not necessarily always doing. Okay. Kind of wish Dark Horse still had the Conan license because I had connections over there where I could just go, hey, I want to do a Conan story. And they would have said, great, let's do it, But now that Marvel has it, I'm not very well connected at Marvel these days. I gotta be honest, I haven't really kept in touch over there very much because I've been so busy at DC for the past, 12, 15 years, whatever it's been. you never want to put all your eggs in one basket, but I'm a master at doing that. Well, the thing is, you spend so much time of your early in your career trying to get work that when you finally get settled in someplace and you're getting regular work, the last thing you want to do is continue to spend time trying to get more work. Johnny Fitz says, Aaron, you've written comics as well as illustrated them too. Yes, I have. I started in a humor book for Marvel called What The? And I was doing Forbish Man stories. And if you don't know who that is, they did a series, Marvel did a series in 1968 that ran about 12 issues. It was just basically they parodied their own characters. Marie Severin did a lot of the artwork in it, and Gene Colan did some stuff that was really great too. And they were basically just, humor stories featuring Captain America, like if Mad Magazine did, Captain America or whatever, of the Marvel Universe. And they had a character called Forbish Man who was sort of the Alfred E. Newman host of the book. And so when I started doing What The, which was basically they brought back the whole parody idea of Marvel characters, that was like my first work at Marvel. I was writing those stories, drawing them and inking them and doing the whole 9 yards. And then, of course, when I went over to Malibu to do Sludge, I wrote several Sludge issues, mainly because Steve Gerber would get behind and we wouldn't have a script. So I'd have to come up with something. And then, so I wrote several issues of that. The Alligator, well, actually, I co-plotted issue 3, which is the first appearance of Lord Pumpkin, or at least had some serious input. Then issue 4 was the Alligator Man in the Sewers issue, which I wrote. And 5 was the Frankenstein issue, which I wrote. And then 6, 7, and 8, I think I co-plotted, or 6 through 9 with Steve. And then he wrote 9 and 10. And then I wrote 12. What was 11? No, sorry, he wrote 10 and 11. I co-plotted with him 6, 7, 8, and 9, and he did the scripts. And then 10 and 11 he wrote again, and then those were actually fill-in issues. And then 12, which is a big double-sized issue, the last issue of Sludge before it got canceled, I wrote that. And then I did wrote and drew a couple of I did a Xena Zero issue for Topps, and then a Xena miniseries that I wrote and drew. I've done Power Cubed, which is my creator-owned book through Dark Horse. That was by me, Garbage Man, and the Metamorpho miniseries, which I also wrote and drew for DC. So yeah, I've done a fair amount of writing. I don't like to do monthly books, though. I would much rather just write a single story like a screenplay, because that was kind of that's what I don't want to say my training, but my training is, that's kind of how episodic writing for like comics or TV is not really of that great of interest to me. But writing a single graphic novel or a movie script or something like that is more up my alley. Although I wouldn't turn down the opportunity to write a monthly book, but it's a little bit more challenging to write and draw a monthly book. Because at least if you're doing a single project like a graphic novel or whatever, you can put all your focus into writing, get the script, and then you can put all your focus into drawing it, right? When you're doing a monthly book, man, you're writing your next issue while you're drawing the one you just wrote, so it's very time consuming and very difficult in a lot of ways, I think. Because I don't like to pad stuff. I would like to, I like the good old days of comics where you had like Spider-Man fought the Green Goblin for 2 or 3 issues and it was on to the next thing. It was on to the next thing. And the connecting thread was always the soap opera stuff between, Peter and his, oops, we don't want that in there. Peter and his career, or his, whoever it was, Gwen Stacy or Mary Jane, or, and his Aunt May's dying all the time. So he had all this other stuff to deal with, school, had all this other stuff to deal with. That's kind of what kept you coming back month to month. That was the connective thread in all of it, where the villain of the month was, that was just that. It changed every issue or 2 issues. So I like to keep things moving. And I know the sort of the way things have become over the last several years is stretch out these story arcs into 6 issues or whatever, so you can get a trade paperback out of it. And No, I'm putting Nighthawk Warrior to sleep with my. You ask a question, you get too much of an answer. You're probably East Coast. Thanks for joining me, though. I appreciate it. Conan kind of went back and forth between having a fur tunic and then like sort of that. Buscema sort of put him in a skirt kind of thing. I guess it'd be a tunic. It wouldn't be a skirt, but it was more of a. And it did kind of look like a mini skirt. But anyway, I'm going to go with the, wild animal hair sort of tunic thing. Although I'm going to give him the Buscema boots. Although I don't know if those really made much sense either, but kind of pirate boots. Well, I guess maybe, he was Conan the Buccaneer, right? So. All right, who else do I put to sleep? Aaron, you would be the perfect teacher since you are a pro artist and writer and doing the whole 9 yards. Well, Comics Legend, thank you so much. I appreciate you saying that. I used to teach a class at the local art college here in Portland many, many years ago, and haven't done it since. But, I've had a few years experience, so I probably have a few nuggets that people might be able to use and appreciate. Scott Gunther drops in from Lincoln, Nebraska, which means it's 11 o'clock there. Yes, Scott, I am working on your cover. I figured, why do it in the solitary solitude is what I meant to say, solitude of my studio, when I can open it up to the world to see this. And so I'm pretty much doing it. And I make sure that her face is spot on. Before I get into inking this. Once you start inking, man, there's no turning back. Well, there is, because there's white out, but I'd rather that not be part of my artistic repertoire. Although sadly, I make use of it more often than I would like. So. Been working on some portraits recently too, which is, it's a nice, well, I don't know if I want to say nice change of pace. It's a challenging change of pace because there's a huge difference between drawing what you see and drawing out of your head. And when you're used to drawing out of your head all the time, actually clearing your mind and drawing what you're seeing can be challenging. You have to sort of get in the right mindset, and it's hard to switch gears like that without a fair amount of time devoted to it. But it's also really cool when you pull off a successful portrait, because those are hard to do. Here's a little too something. A little over chin, I think, maybe. Kirby had a famous line: "You pay me to pencil, or pay me to draw, not to erase." You know, be nice if everything turned out right the first time. You didn't have to make any adjustments. God, you know, I think Supper Lip is too close to her nose. Bring it down a little bit. I should zoom in here a little bit more since I'm spending considerable amount of time on these faces. I wouldn't mind seeing exactly what the heck I'm doing. Oh, I think her eyes are off. See, I got in close and now I'm like, what? That's wrong. That's wrong. That's wrong. And it's too high now. Rodney, watching was really inspiring. Watching me erase has got to be really inspiring too. But thank you. That's very nice. Aaron Lopresti, if possible, or whenever you're available, I could definitely use your advice. You may email me or message me at any time. I check that stuff very frequently, so I won't leave you hanging. I know you're on Twitter, so you can message me through there if you'd like. Or Facebook, or you can email me at aaron@aaronlopresti.com. If you guys haven't subscribed and liked my YouTube channel, please subscribe to it. People tell me that that's helpful. And I wouldn't mind getting it monetized at some point, but I'm quite a few followers or subscribers away from that being the case. But so it doesn't cost anything, just a click of the mouse. So that would be greatly appreciated if you guys could, if you haven't done that, to do that. And tell your friends, because I actually do drawing on here, not just talking. You can watch me screw up and erase and redo, and screw up and erase and redo. Gosh, you looked a little wild-eyed here. Okay. I don't know, this hair is not working for me for some reason. So weird. I finished up Justice League on Friday, and I really didn't do much. Well, I didn't really do any. That's not true. I did some drawing, but not a lot over the weekend, and I feel rusty, which is weird because I mean, it seems like I'm drawing 6 to 7 days a week, you know, at least a little bit every day, and did not draw for a couple days, and I really didn't draw much today at all until this. In fact, I don't think I drew anything today. I had to ship some artwork out, so I, packaged that up and made some phone calls and, day-to-day life stuff, but I didn't do any drawing, and I feel a little rusty right now for some reason. It's very odd. All right. I wonder if that leg would look better if I did that. Seems a little too. See, one thing I don't like is this sort of. I don't know if uniformity is the word I want to use, but when things just seem a little like, look at Conan's legs here. It's like they're both just sort of in the same position. It's like, I don't know. It seems too posed. So I'm wondering if I bring this leg down and back, I'm just going to cut it off, but by the cover, but it might seem a little bit more. Like he's, yeah. I'm going to do that. What the heck? I'm going to do it. Okay. Should I start inking? I think I should. Let's see. I retweeted this live stream. I'll try and get the word out more. You're an awesome artist, dude. Thank you, Johnny. I appreciate that. In 4 days, it'll be Jack Kirby's 103rd birthday. How about that? This is an interesting comment here, if I may. Kirby also hated inking his own work. He thought inking was a waste of time because he just wanted to move on to penciling the next story. There's two ways you can approach comic art. I tend to be a little bit more into the old school aspect of it, where deadlines are super important. And then you have the generation that sort of came right after me. Even though we kind of broke in at the same time, guys like Terry Dodson are people of that age, who's basically about 8 years younger than me, although we broke in at the same time because I was at film school doing film things. I wasn't pursuing art, and then I kind of got into art a little bit, or back into art later than most people would have. But I was, I was brought up, I was brought up in the 70s, and that was more an era in comics of, you do the best you can with the time you've got to work on something, and then you move on to the next, right? It was all about, do a page a day, do this, do that, meet your deadlines. And so I can understand where Kirby was coming from, because I feel that way sometimes too. I used to put a lot of time. I never, hack stuff out. I try not to. You want to do a good job, but you spend a lot of time on a drawing, and then you have to go back in and basically, not the inkers do more than trace, of course, but I'm just saying that you go back in and you're basically going over the work you just drew. So it's like you feel like you're drawing it twice, and it seems like you're doing twice the work. And yeah, you get paid obviously for inking, but I don't know. It's when you're redrawing the same thing, it's brutal. And you never do anything this loose, right? I mean, these pencils are they're fairly loose for me anyway. And when I do these sketch covers and stuff, I got equal amounts of time into penciling and inking, so it's kind of a continuation of the same process. Whereas when you're working on the interior of books, you're doing a lot more effort into the pencils and doing finished pencils, because you're trying to, obviously you want your editor to be impressed, but if someone else is inking you want to make sure that they're not guessing on what you want them to do. And so even if you're inking yourself doing the interiors, you're in a habit of putting a lot of work in. And so it's just, and I also, honestly, when I'm doing finished work, I like to know what I'm doing when I'm inking. I don't want a lot of guesswork, because if I screw up when I'm inking, that's a lot harder to fix than if you screw up when you're penciling, right? So I really understand the feeling, and often feel the same way. It's kind of like, I'm done penciling this. I want to move on to the next project. I don't want to go back and revisit this. That's why I rarely ink the interiors. I mean, I did in the Batman stories, the Legends of the Dark Knight story I did, where I wrote, penciled, and inked it. But that was brutal. I think what I did was I penciled the entire thing and then went back and inked it, because by the time I go back to that first page, it's been done like a month or more in the past. And so you're kind of like, it seems fresher to you, and you can, you don't feel like you just finished it. Now I got to ink it kind of feel. But I mean, I'll ink my own covers and stuff, but I tend to lose focus and get impatient. And then I do sloppy inking, which is, I mean, that's pretty pathetic when you don't do a good job inking yourself. I can do a good job, but it's keeping that focus is challenging for me. So it's like I inked the first issue of Power Cubed, my creator-owned book, obviously because I had no money to pay anybody to do it, and it just took me so long, and it was just brutal. And so I had to hire, let's see, Mark Morales inked 2 issues, then Mark Daring inked, or pardon me, inked 1 issue, then inked 1 issue, and then Mark Daring came in and inked the last 2 issues, because I just couldn't do it. Part of the problem with that was, though, too, I was working full-time at DC and trying to do this book on the side. And so you pencil a page, and then you're supposed to ink something else at night. And it was like, maybe when I was 25, but not so much now. John Smith jumped in. Hey, John, good to see you. Or I should say, read your post there, your message. I'm not seeing you, as it were. That's a good point. Jack Kirby loved telling stories, and he felt inking took him away from that, since he had already figured out the story. Yeah, excuse me. The inking is definitely a purely artistic endeavor, and unless you're doing finishes over somebody, it's not really, you're not really involved in the storytelling. You're just involved in making the final artwork look good. So I can definitely see that. Paul Brillart says, my whole takeaway from the discussion is that Dodson is younger than me. Must be City Miles. Well, he's younger than me, so. But I have to admit, most of my friends, my comic book artist friends, are older than me. I did not spend a lot of time hanging out, other than Terry, with my contemporaries. I spent all my time like seeking out all the old pros that I loved growing up, like Simonson and Mike Plug and guys like that. And so that's sort of, I spent more time hanging out with those guys than I did guys that are potentially my contemporaries. So. But being consistently, not in all cases, but in most cases, 8 to 10 years older than guys that are actually in my, if you want to call it your class of artists. I mean, class not being quality, but, like like your school class or something like that. We came out, basically broke in about the same time. All those guys are, like I said, are probably 8 to 10 years younger than me. And so I was married by the time I broke into comics. So, a lot of these guys were still single. So they were out doing stuff, that I wasn't going to be involved in. Because I had a different family dynamic. So it made it hard to hang out with those guys anyway. So I would hang out with the older guys who were already married and had kids, and even though they'd been in the business 20 years longer than me. Aaron, do you have the Power Cube graphic novel available on your website for purchase? I do not, and I probably should. And the reason I don't is because I got Dark Horse sent. I might have a couple copies here. I mean, if you're seriously interested in getting it, you can email me or message me or whatever about it, because I think I have a few copies laying around here, but I have to buy them from Dark Horse. No, I get them at cost, but I still have to buy them. It's not like they sent me like 50 copies or 100 copies or something. So I didn't want to buy a bunch of them and just sit on them. So yeah, I have a few, but I don't have enough that I would necessarily offer them up for sale on my website. But I think you can get it through Amazon and all that kind of stuff too. But if you wanted a signed copy or something, do message me and I can hook you up. Well, I can probably get them cheaper on Amazon than I could get them through Dark Horse. Anyway, so that's what's happening there. I'll zoom in again here. Still using this 0.8 Le Pen drawing pen, in case you're keeping score at home. I'm going to be doing a lot of these live feeds over the next couple weeks. Because like I said, I got commissions to do, and I got time to do these. That's what it always comes down to. Is like I was really, the Justice League stuff was hard because there was so many characters. So it was like there was no such thing really as an easy page. So I would always end up working into the night on them, and so I just didn't really have time to do a lot of live feeds, because obviously I couldn't show you what I was working on because it hasn't come out yet. And the comic companies sort of frown on us revealing stuff before it's out, so kind of put me in I didn't really have anything to draw live that I could show you guys. So it's only when I'm doing commissions or one of the Aaron cons, which is essentially be doing commissions and just calling it something different. But anyway, yeah, so I haven't had time to do them, but I do now. So I will be doing more of these. If I get an extension for my cable here, it's always blocking our view. I'll drag this camera over to my drafting table, and I could actually do a live feed with me working on Kit Carter or something that might be kind of interesting. It always cracked me up when Conan or whoever had Barbarian, fill in your Barbarian here. would have one of these armbands on their bicep, and you're like, you know, the bicep changes shape so frequently by the movement of your arm. How in the heck, they keep that thing from, it'd have to be so tight. It would really be difficult to move your arm to keep it from falling off. These are the dumb things that we think of as we're drawing this stuff. I mean, that's my biggest problem, really, is where a lot of guys, especially in the 90s, when, you had all these heroes being created with these giant shoulder pads with spikes on them and all this kind of stuff. You're like, okay, if that dude raised his arm, those spikes would go right to his temple, but no one really thought of how functional the things were. They just said, oh, this looks cool. Oh, this looks cool. This looks cool. And I shouldn't say never, but it was very hard for me to kind of get into that mode because I'm always thinking practically, going, well, if I put that there, how's he going to bend his arm? I mean, it just, that's why I was such a big fan of, or still am, of like all those early designs of all the superheroes. Gil Kane did a lot of designs for like the Silver Age DC books, like Green Lantern, and Flash was Carmen Infantino, but, the Atom and things like that, they were just basically skin tight leotards with different designs on them, right? And so basically you're doing anatomy drawing, and you don't have to worry about the functionality of a shoulder pad or an elbow brace or forearm pads or whatever, because it was just, you were just drawing the human figure with stuff painted on it. And to me, that's much more, I mean, I would rather draw the human figure than draw the junk to put on the costume. That's why I can't stand Iron Man. Well, I should say I can't stand drawing Iron Man. When he was like in his, his early 60s stages, like, Iron Man 1 came out, that Gene Colan armor, it was all bendy, like, like it was painted on anyway. And so I was like, okay, I'm cool with that. But if I had to actually, when you draw like what Adi Gravinoff did with, and making it just super high tech and all sort of, more realistic looking, like armor, it's kind of like, okay, great. Now I got to figure out where all the joints are and how this moves and how, and it's just like that is just not my, what do the kids say? That's just not my jam. So, yeah, I would have been much better served to, been working in the 60s, although nobody got paid anything in the 60s. So I don't know how great it would have been. That's the thing, man. Neil Adams is the exception. I mean, he could really crank stuff out and still do a really nice job. But, you look at half of Buscema's stuff, and I'm a huge Buscema fan, but it's not particularly developed artwork. A lot of it is very rough. And then Sinnott or whoever would come in and do finishes over the top of them, because a lot of these guys were doing they had to do 2 or 3 books a month just to make enough money to, put food on the table. That's not the case now, although with the implosion of DC to a certain extent, there may be considerably less jobs available. We'll see how that shakes out. But, at least nowadays, the page rates are good enough for most people that you can do a book a month and, make a reasonable living. But man, back then you had to turn and burn, which my point to saying that was I just find it remarkable that people like Steranko, did and Barry Smith did the level of work and rights and that they were able to do. Of course, they didn't, that's why they were generally not on monthly books. And, but still, you're not making much money, even though you're doing spectacular work, when you're taking a month or 2 months to do a comic book, at the rates those guys were getting paid, that's not good money. And that's always the bummer. I mean, if you're married and have kids, it becomes a real issue. If you're single, I suppose you can sort of, live on less. Paul Brillart says Conan drew the definitive Iron Man. Yeah, I think he did. Scott Gunther, who I'm drawing this for, is checking out for the evening. Good night, Scott. Thanks for joining me. I don't know if I'm actually going to finish this tonight, but I'll have it finished by tomorrow sometime and hopefully out in the mail tomorrow afternoon. I don't like to hang on to this stuff very long once I get it done because that's just like a disaster waiting to happen. You know, you got a dog and you got my daughter, like I said, she's 18, but she's still around doing crazy stuff and occasionally might sit on something that I haven't taken very good care of, or something might get spilt on something. So I like to get these suckers out the door as soon as I get them done. And then there's this guy from Europe I've got to do something for. And I can't remember if he's in France or Italy. I can't remember. I have to go look at his stuff. But he had a book he wanted me to sketch it. And I was like, oh, that's cool. So I thought, wow, he's going to ship a book over here. You know, that's expensive. It'd be cheaper just to get a sketch, right? And then mail him the sketch back than it would be to have him ship me the book, then do the sketch in the book, and then ship the book back. Well, he ships me the book. And it's one of those like 1,000,000-page Marvel volumes that are, like this thick. Thing weighed like 20 pounds. I'm like, wow. Shipping that from Europe to here, now I got to ship it back to him. I mean, that's a fortune just in shipping. But I guess, that's the interesting thing about Europe. If you're living in Europe, you've got, you don't have access to us. And if you want some artwork or something, man, I guess they sort of accept the fact that they're going to get screwed on the shipping. There's just no way around it. I mean, we all get over there occasionally for, cons and stuff, but nowhere near with the frequency that we do at US cons. So, Conan's hair is a little wavy. Maybe a little too styling for a barbarian. I don't know. Conan's tricky because he has to be handsome, but he also has to be sort of thuggish. And so that's a difficult combination sometimes to really sort of make that work. Not to suggest that King Cole was a pretty boy, but he wasn't. But he was more of just kind of a, King David, a handsome sort of, barbarian king, where there's a certain persona about it. I mean, Conan, he's got to be kind of thuggish. He just has to be. And so you want to get that across in his looks, but he also has to be ruggedly handsome. So, because he has plenty of the barbarian wenches from that time at his disposal. So, ooh, that wasn't very politically correct. I guess I just got canceled. Let's see. Live on less. I think that was the DCN theme. Boy, I think you're right. Conan is feeling pretty. Yeah, exactly. A little too much hair action going on there. I don't know. Well, I'll just have to make Wonder Woman like prettier so that Conan doesn't get too much of a pretty boy look. But yeah, you don't want like curls in his hair, and I already did that. I'm kind of like, why did I put curls into Conan's hair? Oh man. Yeah, what are you gonna do? I still have time to rat it up a little bit. Oh, her hand's a mess. Fix that. There's always this kind of, at least for me, this kind of I have this inclination to always make the hair like flowing and stuff, and you go, wow, that's Conan. I just made him, give him like, Fabio flowing, locks. And you're kind of like, that probably isn't the best Conan look. I managed not to do that in the Conan Wonder Woman book on the interior. In fact, let's take a brief look, a break here, and take a look. Ooh, there's the gorgeous Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. I heard bad things about the second movie, like at least on the original screening, so now I'm apprehensive. But let's see. There's Wonder Woman. Yeah, I mean, look, Conan's got, that's all straight hair. Nothing glamorous about Conan's do. Here we see him again here. No, he's got a little bit of it blowing here in the wind, but it's kind of stringy and kind of spooky looking, so I think we're good to go. The one thing Gail's been really good about, every time it seems like I draw Wonder Woman for her, she gets a great white shark in there, which I greatly appreciate. And this series is full of sharks, well, at least one issue is. There's those witches covered in crow's feathers. And that's it. I like this panel a lot. Let's see if we can kill the glare. There we go. I just thought the pose turned out nice with her kind of yelling and gloating over after she defeated these dudes in the arena. Yeah, see, there's Conan, sort of handsome but thuggish. That's what we're going for, right? So that's a good Conan face right there, I think. There's a crow eating a human eyeball. Now, how often do you get to draw that? Let's see. See, I got a little bit of kind of wave at the bottom where his hair curls up, but that's pretty ragged. I always left his ear hanging out. I don't know why. It seemed less glamorous, I guess. So anyway, I was going to put the book up and I went, oh, wait a minute, I'm drawing on it. All right, so we got some broadswords here to ink. Then I still got to do Wonder Woman's face. So funny, I said that I had that 2-year run on Wonder Woman, which I probably became most known for as doing Wonder Woman, which is interesting because drawing Wonder Woman, which is interesting because there's a lot of guys, Terry, Phil Jimenez, George Perez. You can go down a list of people that are known as Wonder Woman artists, it's pretty amazing because, you know, if someone said, name a Captain America artist, most people would either say, I mean, if you look at the entire history of the character, you would say Kirby, maybe Gene Colan, maybe Steranko, right? As your definitive Captain America artist. Maybe Mike Zeck. You know, so 3 or 4 guys, right? For a character that's been around for 70 or 80 years. You know, but or if you say who is the best Superman artist or who is the best whatever, usually 1 or 2 names will come up. But you ask people who the best Wonder Woman artist was, and you're going to get 10 different answers. It's pretty amazing that I think that's more attributable to the fact of the cultish popularity of the character. You know, it's kind of like Legion fans. If you draw Legion, you're their favorite artist until you're not drawing Legion anymore, then they don't care. You know, and I think Wonder Woman was the same way. I mean, my gosh, I was riding a considerable wave of popularity within a certain group when I was drawing Wonder Woman. But as soon as I got off Wonder Woman, it was kind of like, I just became another artist. And so that's a very interesting phenomenon. But there's people that'll tell you that, you know, George Perez is the best Wonder Woman artist. No, Terry Dodson's the best Wonder Woman artist. No, pardon me. I just said his name. Phil Jimenez, you know, or there's some people that actually think I am, which is quite flattering and very nice. You know, or Brian Boland because of his great covers, or Adam Hughes, who I don't think actually ever did Wonder Woman work on the interiors. I mean, he did some stuff like a Wonder Woman origin story, a couple pages long, but he did so many covers, and he just, you know, so he's the best Wonder Woman artist, and it's really interesting. So does this get framed, flattened out with a double side? You know, that's an excellent question. You'd have to ask the dude who's getting it. Because he said when, you know, I told him, I said, I don't normally do 2 characters on here. And I said, if I'm going to do 2 characters, you realize it's going to stretch out over the back cover as well. He's like, yeah, that's cool. And so I don't know. Most people, I don't think they flatten them out and frame them like this. I think they just, you know, and that's the thing. If you bag and board it, you're only going to get half the image. And the other half's going to be on the back. So, I mean, some of these people get these slabbed and then so they're in a clear plastic thing, right? So they can flip them over and look at the art, but it's still kind of, you can't really see the whole piece at once. I mean, if it were me, I would probably flatten it out and frame it. Because at this point, this comic is not like a collector's item, right? It's not like, oh my gosh, you know, get Conan Wonder Woman #1 in near mint and it's worth $200 or whatever. You know, it's worth $3. So, you know, if you get one with a sketch cover, you're really, the purpose of getting is for the art, right? The sketch on here. So, you know, you can get another copy that's just the comic, and then you take this and, you know, flatten out and frame it. I don't know. It's a good question. Depend on the person, I suppose. I don't normally marker these covers because I never know if the paper's any good. And what I mean by that, some of this paper does not take marker well at all. And so if I start markering this and it doesn't look good, well, then what do? Right? I mean, you've already laid down a little bit of marker and it's like, well, I've got to finish it up and the whole thing looks like crap. or you just don't do it at all, which is what I'm going to do here, which means I'm going to put a lot more line work into this at some point to kind of, make it more of a black and white drawing than I would if it was a marker drawing where I would do a lot of rendering and stuff with the marker. But I'm not going to do that with this. It also reflects in the price. So, I don't like to, I was going to say I don't like to charge a lot, but I do charge a fair amount for a better deal for me is getting one of my 11x14 sketches or 11x17 full color sketch than one of these, because for the actual size of the drawing and stuff, it's a better deal. But I charge more on these because a lot of people just get them CGC and then they just sell them. And it's kind of like, well, if that's what you're going to do, then I'm going to charge more. So I get a little bit of, more out of it. Because at that point, you're just creating a commercial piece of work for them to make money off of. So I should make a little money off of it too. And so that's why my prices on these are for single character black and white like this. I charge $150 for a single character 11x14 markered and inked convention piece. I would charge $200. So that's a better deal, right? But these sketch covers seem to be this wild, weird commodity. So if you're going to be, if you're going to be making money off me, I'm going to be making money off me if I can. But it's a thing. It's like those trading card. When people used to get the blanks? And this isn't that long ago, like 10 years ago, maybe, if that. And they wanted everybody to do drawings on these cards. And some of these cards were going for upwards of $500, because everybody was getting sketches on them, and then they would just sell them on eBay. And so I would charge an astronomical amount of money if someone wanted a sketch on a cover, or pardon me, on a blank card. I'd put a lot of work into it, but come on, it's a headshot that's, this big. And I would charge hundreds of dollars for them. And people paid it. I was like, and at that point, they just, that's how the market had blown up, and people were just, if they wanted a card with a sketch on it, they were going to pay through the nose to get it. And everybody seemed to realize that and know it. So, but I just didn't want, not that the cards I was doing would, have drawn that much money, but just the fact that, an Adam Hughes sketch card would be going for $800 to $1,000 for just a little headshot that he did on his card. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to charge half that much then. I'm getting caught up here on my messages. Let's see. Conan is feeling pretty. The flowing locks bring out the beauty in his brutality. I wouldn't mind looking like Fabio. Don't judge me. Great work. Thank you. And Awful Redneck Gaming says, for sure. He says, a man's ear. Okay. You drew her best hair, most definitely. Well, thank you. I've always got, that's the thing, you always talk about McFarlane's capes and stuff and how they're always just like a mile long and all over the place because he was using them as a design element. And they never really made sense, but that really wasn't the point. And, or Spider-Man's webbing, that type of thing. And I kind of do that with the hair of my characters, especially Wonder Woman. There's never, almost never, a scene where her hair is not moving. A lot of times, even inside, she's standing in a room and her hair is still sort of, not always, but mostly. Because hair can be really boring, and I like to, and the same thing with capes. You don't like to have a cape just sitting there. Occasionally you do on Batman because of how sometimes it'll go all the way down to the floor and kind of spread out, and that's kind of cool. But most of the time I'll have like Superman in this Justice League stuff, his cape is always moving. And Batman's cape is always moving, Because it's more interesting to look at. Let's see. Paul says, Rodney says you drew the best hair. Thank you. Paul says you put your stamp on Wonder Woman at the right time with the right author and Gail. You did great work and were very kind to my daughter who is in middle school. Your daughter was in middle school? She's like moved out and like graduated now, isn't she? Or no, wait a minute. Is that some? Now I can't remember. Is your daughter still in school? This is somebody else's daughter I was thinking of. Because that guy who bought artwork from me, and he used to bring his daughter with him to conventions in Portland, and she was like little. And then like I saw her at Rose City Comic Con last year, or he came up with his daughter, and she was like graduated college, had a job, had her own apartment, and you're just like, wait a minute, what? When did that happen? Anyway, Paul, I interrupted reading your message there. He says, you're very kind to my daughter. Oh, well, I try to be nice to everybody. It seems like the right thing to do. But thank you for noticing. To my daughter who was in middle school, when we went to WonderCon, well, she's got to be out of high school by now, doesn't she? $800 sketch card is for the faint of heart. I'm telling you, man, that was $500-600 to get like a Travis Charest one. Paul, she finished grad school this year. Yeah, time flies, man. Time flies. Well, my son is now 27, which I just can't even believe. My daughter's 18, going to be going to college, and we're going to take her in end of September. So it's right around the corner. We will be empty nesters. So my wife had to get a puppy. So now we're not empty nesters. We have a wild and crazy miniature schnauzer. And this guy has got energy beyond what I have left. I can tell you that. But he is hilarious. And if I got to take care of a dog, I want high comic relief with my dog. So I really want to get a bulldog, but they're too expensive and they're not very healthy. And I didn't want to deal with vet bills and then, having the tragedy of having to have something really seriously wrong with your dog, which we just went through with our previous dog. She had liver disease for most of her life. Finally had to put her to sleep at last September, a year ago, or October. And that sucked. So these schnauzers are supposed to be a very healthy breed, so hopefully he will last a good long time. And so I told my daughter, right, I said, this dog is like 5 months old right now. And I said, do you realize if he lives to be 15, your kids, my grandkids, will play with this dog? That's just, to even think about something like that just freaks me out. Hopefully I'll be around to play with the grandkids. The dog will be. I don't know if I will be, but I hope I will be. Gotta put a little shadow down here. Ooh, almost 10 o'clock. That would be 1 a.m. on the East Coast. Do you have any East Coasters still hanging in there? Just curious. Curious. It's really weird around here, man. It's been hot. It's August, so it's going to be hot, but not hot like, Southern California or Phoenix hot, but, high 80s, low 90s, that type of thing. And I'm upstairs, and it's generally pretty nice through most of the day, but it is almost 10 o'clock at night, and it is boiling up here right now. And it's like it takes that long for the heat to work its way up to the second story here of this house, which is pretty remarkable. You'd think it'd be cooling off, but no, it isn't. I worked in a commercial art studio before I got into comics in Portland here, back when they still had such things. And the guy that ran the studio was an illustrator out of Atlanta, and he would, he worked in a studio, of course, because that was the thing back in the day. And he was saying that, he would work in a studio in Atlanta, and they had no AC, right? So he was just talking about how they're just like, would have towels wiping their hands off to keep from sweating all over the drawings that they were working on. And I guess that's not a big issue now with so many people doing digital stuff, but I am not digital. I don't like digital. Not that people don't do cool stuff with digital, but you do digital, your drawing exists in cyberspace, and that bugs me. I want to actually have a drawing that I can either appreciate and keep or sell to somebody else who will appreciate it. So this whole, I'm too old, set in my ways to embrace digital technology. I mean, I color in Photoshop and stuff. It's very convenient, although I'd much rather be painting. But I've finally gotten fairly proficient at coloring, or at least I was. I haven't colored anything in a while. I guess that Captain America print I did, but that was a few months ago. But I would much rather, do a painting than do a digital color job. But at least if I do the digital color job, at least I'm still doing the line work in black and white, right? So you still have an original piece, even though the color piece isn't original. I mean, it's original, but it's not, you don't have a physical piece of artwork, is what I'm trying to say. So I'm trying to say. I'm kind of winging where I'm knocking in the blacks and the shadow areas here. See, this is something I would never do on a finished piece, like a cover or an interior. I would figure all this out in the penciling. I wouldn't take a chance that I would lay in a shadow someplace and go, ooh, that really looks bad. What do I do now? Although most of the time, you've got enough experience, or at least I have enough experience, that I don't normally do that, drop in something and go, wow, that was dumb. Why did I do that? Because generally speaking, once you understand where your light source is, then you can sort of justify where you put your shadows and stuff. But you just have to be consistent on the entire figure, right? Like, I'm not going to drop a shadow down here, but then no shadows on this leg. Doesn't make any sense. And there I am, again, being logical. When really what I should be treating these drawings is, you treat blacks like Kevin Nolan does a really good job of using black shadow areas as design elements on the figure, more than actual literal, shadows caused by a direct light source. Although they're consistent, I'm not saying he doesn't do that, but I'm just saying that he does a really good job of creating those black areas as design elements. David Finch does too. And of course, Wrightson did an incredible job of that. And Frazetta as well. My shadow work tends to be more practical. I don't want to say realistic, but I figure if the light source is here, then the shadows are going to be on the back. You know what I mean? Instead of thinking maybe next level and trying to come up with a really cool looking shadow design effect that doesn't really necessarily make sense when you stop to break it down. Which is, for someone who works in comics, I spend way too much time stuck in reality in my drawing, and I think it kind of holds me back from being sort of next level unique, which some guys are, and it's it makes a huge difference in your popularity if you can bring something to the table that no one else is doing or very few people are doing. That uniqueness goes a long way in this industry. And I tend to be too much of a traditionalist, I think, for my own good. Not that that's a bad thing, but it's kind of the difference between, John Buscema and Barry Smith. I think I've made this comparison before in their Conan work. I mean, Buscema's work is brilliant, but Barry Smith's is brilliant and unique, where Buscema's is more traditional and expected. It's like you'd show the Barry Smith work to someone who's not a comic book reader, and they would look at it and go, "Why is his eyes so big? And that's weird. I don't get it." And they'd look at Buscema and go, "Yes, that's right," because it looks like it should look to them. But when your main audience is comic book people and they've seen all that stuff, when you bring something sort of unique or different or weird, like McFarlane is another good example, to the table, it really attracts attention. And it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with how good the drawing is, but it's how interesting or unique the drawing is. And, I'm a traditional who pushes, accuracy and do it right and that kind of thing. And that's really not always the best advice. So listen to me in guarded measure. Comics Legends loves Buscema's work. So do I. But it's not as unique as Barry Smith's, and it's certainly not as popular as Barry Smith's. And that's reflected in the collector's market, how much, Buscema's stuff, since he passed away, his stuff is considerably more expensive, but it's nowhere near as expensive as Barry Smith's stuff. And granted, there's a lot more of Buscema's stuff out there than there is of Barry Smith's, and that's probably a determining factor as well. But still, I don't think there's the level of, it's like Stranko too. Stranko didn't do a large body of work, and sometimes his anatomy is a little bit wonky, but he just did so many cool things with storytelling, and uniqueness, and in some of his drawing that really, overshadowed guys that were doing really strong contemporary work, or strong work as his contemporaries at the time, I mean. But they were just doing more traditional artwork, which, again, it's a look you expect, and so therefore you don't really look at, the uniqueness of it. And I oftentimes fall into that category, even though I think, if I may say so, I think I get shortchanged sometimes with, people look at my stuff and go, "Oh, that's very traditional, and it's solid and whatever." But I'm doing some stuff that other people aren't doing, but I don't think it's really noticeable because it's just so traditional looking. But again, I came up in a very traditional era of comics, and that's kind of what I was looking at. So by the time I, started drawing, I was more apt to come out looking like Buscema than I would be, Arthur Adams or somebody. And that's a lot of guys that are my contemporaries, I said, are 8 to 10 years younger than me. They grew up on Golden, and then Art Adams, and then, McFarlane and guys like that. They were doing some really untraditional approaches to their work. Now, guys they're excellent, by the way. But so they have a completely different, vibe to their work than I do, even though we all broke in at the same time. So I guess the moral of the story is I think that in comic art and probably in traditional illustration as well, although there really isn't anything, there's not really traditional illustration these days. And like there used to be, everything's Photoshop manipulation and photo manipulation, movie posters, everything. People just are not using art like they used to. And but if you look back on classical illustrators, like, Leyendecker, for example, who was just an excellent draftsman, but at the same time, his work was very angular and unique in a lot of ways and looked very different from what other people were doing. And you might have guys that were doing Saturday Evening Post covers that were just, really lifelike and just very traditional looking and well, executed and everything like that. But they just didn't have that sort of extra interesting factor that you looked at and went, wow, that's different. I really like it. So if you can pull off a style that's unique, but at the same time looks different than what everybody else is doing, you've really got something. Fly Fox Pro says, this is looking fantastic. Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate you saying that. See, I got to put more line work in on this stuff because I'm not markering it. And it's kind of funny. I probably would rather go in and noodle like this, even though it's probably more time consuming than what I do with the markers. But I am a big detail guy. That's the thing. I sort of have traditional roots in how I draw, but being a fan of guys like Barry Smith and Neil Adams and Wrightson, I love putting that detail in there. Although the interesting thing about Wrightson is, everybody thinks of his Frankenstein stuff, which I think of as illustration. I don't look at it as comic work. People say, oh, it's the greatest comic work ever done. Well, it wasn't done for a comic. It was done for a book illustration. So I look at that more as traditional illustration than comic art. But he did not put a lot of detail, line work in his work. It was just great placement of shadows to create volume. And he had lines coming out of it, but he did not. His comic work was more uniquely drawn in sort of this combo, I don't want to say cartoony, but exaggerated style. And the anatomy and the facial features were more larger eyes, that kind of thing. And but then that just tremendous use of black placement to create volume is just what made his stuff so remarkable. And he would do, when he inked with a pen, like say you look at the 10th issue of Swamp Thing where he inked that with a pen as opposed to a brush. There's a lot more line work in that than there is in his earlier issues where it's all brush. But it's interesting. Take a look at his stuff, and there's not as much line work as you might think that there is in there. Unlike Barry Smith, who's got like lines all over the place, right? It's just busy work. But it looks cool. And I put lines in, but again, I put them in practically, out of shadowed areas and line sources. I don't just randomly put in lines usually to make something look busy. A lot of guys do that. And again, it's very visceral. So it does sort of create a cool look. But again, I'm constantly battling, are these lines creating a shape? Are they softening the edge of a shadow? What are their purpose? I don't usually just put in lines to put in lines. And a lot of guys do, and people love that stuff. But I don't know, again, like I said, I get held back by my own practicality. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with doing that. I'm just saying I don't do it because it doesn't make sense to me to do it. You have to go beyond logic to just say, hey, this looks cool, I'm going to do this. Oh, Fly Fox Pro found my Star Trek comic that I worked on. Yeah, I did. That was for DC years ago. It was fun, but it was also difficult because you had to sort of capture enough of the likeness. That was the cool thing about Star Trek, was that DC actually had the license not just for the characters, but to do the likenesses of the actors. And so Kirk looked like Kirk, and Spock looked like Leonard Nimoy, and George Takei was Sulu, you know. And when you have to do that, every time you draw the picture, you got to try and make it look like that actor. But then, and you might get a reasonable, you know, look. But then the inker comes in, and I'm not ripping on Randy Emberlin who inked it. I mean, he did a fine job. But it's like they're trying to ink over the top of what you've just nuanced to sort of look like William Shatner, and then if one of their lines is just a little bit off, then it alters the look, and it's really challenging. You know, if I was inking it myself, it may have been less so because I'd have been more in control of the finished look of it. But that's the problem with that stuff, is getting those likenesses, and then you're getting them likenesses from 3/4 shot, low angle shots, and you're like, you can't find photo reference for those shots, you know, so you're just going to have to wing it. Find elements in their features that, you know, attribute to their signature look, I guess the only way I could put it. And you can incorporate those elements consistently, then you can kind of get a look to them. But it's much easier doing a cover or a single Star Trek illustration, because you can focus all your effort into getting the likeness on a single illustration, rather than having to deal with it from a panel to panel issue, or for an entire issue. But I'm a huge Star Trek fan, so I did like the opportunity to do it. I'm going to take some of the curl out of his hair here as I'm inking it, I think. I'm inking this hair very loosely, which I kind of dig. Again, it's something I don't do, but I see a lot of guys are, like, if you look at Ron Garney's stuff, who I love Ron personally, and I love his work. And he's gotten looser and looser over the years, but the figure work is still like super strong and right on the money. So, and Lee Weeks is another guy who just, you know, does very loose. And Dan Panosian has been doing some stuff. And this is the funny thing about Dan, is that, you know, he inked a lot of X-Men stuff in the 90s, and I never really thought of him as a penciler. And recently I've seen all this pencil work he's been posting on Twitter and stuff, and it's really good. You know, it's very, again, it's a loose, rougher style, which I really like and would like to do more of myself, except it always looks weird to me because my stuff has always been so tight that when I do loose stuff, it looks like it's not right. And then I end up chickening out and making it tight again. But I can, in these sketches, get kind of loose. That's kind of the fun thing about these. I can, because it is a sketch and expected to be a sketch, I can, excuse me, I can be loose with it because it is a sketch and there's an expectation that it's going to be looser, and try some stuff that I wouldn't normally do. And it's fun. It's fun just kind of be rough and kind of noodle around a little bit. But anyway, yeah, so there's guys doing that stuff, and it's just really, really cool. And I would, I mean, I think so. As long as the drawing is really solid underneath, and you still maintain a sense of style to it, I like it. You know, I was so influenced by Killing Joke and Boland, and how that tight that stuff was, with the line work and the precision and just everything. that I kind of got sucked into that look. And of course, the guys I were looking at, no one was, Wrightson kind of inked loosely, although it didn't really appear that he did, but he did. But Barry Smith was very tight. Stranko's stuff was always very polished looking. So a lot of the guys that I was looking at, Neil Adams is a little rougher because he used a ton of kind of sketchy line work in there that Giordano and even Tom Palmer did a really nice job of capturing. But I don't know. Again, everything was always so polished. Stuff I was, like Starlin stuff. I used to love his stuff when I was a kid. So Warlock and Captain Marvel. The stuff was just always really, when it was finished and inked, it was always really slick looking. So that's sort of the style I ended up running with. Rodney, thanks for joining me, man. I appreciate it. Have a good night. That's right. Let me see if I can. There's still 15 people watching right now, so people are hanging in there despite the late hour. It's tough to do these during the day because you never know, people's work schedules are. And it was easy like the first month of the quarantine because everybody was still at home, but people aren't home anymore. And people are back to work. And so, which I'm glad of, don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining about that. But it's a little harder to kind of figure out what's a good time because I know I have a lot of people on the East Coast that watch these. So if I do them too late at night, they can't watch. But if I do it too early, then the West Coast people are still working. So I'm telling you, man, the trials and tribulations of a YouTube artist. Oops. So we got Conan sort of lined up, and you probably still can't see all the. There you go. Some of that, a lot of the line work that I put in there. Just kind of scribbling around, having a little fun with it. Cross hatching in here. Yeah, these lines like these, like I just did on this boot right here, I would never do that on a comic book page. Not that there's anything wrong with it. It's just, it's too loose. It's too random for me to wrap my head around as a finished piece of artwork. But God, the reason people buy sketchbooks is because we like to see the process, right? I mean, that's all we ever see in comics is finished artwork, but it's really cool to be able to look at, how a person gets to that finished piece. And a lot of times the sketches and the roughs are way more interesting than the finished art. I mean, no one's going to look at a finished Adam Hughes piece, with all the wonderful colors and everything he does and say, okay, well, I'd much rather have a sketch. But again, the sketches are just, it's just pure art, for art's sake. And it's a lot of times they're more lively, have more energy in them than finished pieces do. We have a tendency, I think, to ink the life out of our drawings in comics. But again, then it's the old argument of, are comics commercial art or are they fine art? I mean, technically they're commercial art, but we have a lot of people, in the modern era, again, since Wrightson and Smith and that crowd, Plug and guys like that showed up, kind of changed it more from just storytelling into an art form. And so then you start getting people making the argument about whether or not it's fine art or commercial art, but essentially it is commercial art because it's going out to commercial artists. We're not creating images for our own recreation. We're doing it for a purpose, for a monetary purpose. So it's hard to get around the fact saying it's not commercial art. But we have such a unique array of styles in the industry now that, that's kind of what the cool thing about comics right now is that there's 100 different styles, being used in comics right now, and they're all legit. Well, not all of them, but most of them are legit. And it's not like there's a Marvel or DC house style anymore. It's people kind of do their own thing and live and die on it. Bill Sienkiewicz, that's more like fine art than commercial art, that's for sure. Dave McKeon, guys like that, just doing some really wild stuff. But again, it's still for commercial purposes, though, right? So, let's see. Fly Fox Pro says, I think 5 to 7 West Coast is a good time. Well, that's generally, of course, I cook dinner in my house. My wife does the laundry and I do the cooking. And so that's usually I'm making dinner. So it's like I either have to go from 5 to 7 and do a late dinner, or 6 to 8, somewhere in that neighborhood, so I can get dinner in before I do one of these. Challenges of everyday life, man. I'm telling you. I generally don't do as much line work on the women because I don't know. I like to keep their look a little bit more elegant. And again, that just may be old school Aaron, but see, somebody like Terry Dodson is completely opposite of me. He's very open, has a lot of animation influence in his work, where it's very difficult for me not to put line work on something, even just a little bit. It's almost sacrilege for me to do I'm sliding all over the place. It's almost sacrilege for me to do a comic book drawing without, or a dark shadow area without some lines coming out of it. And a lot of times I sit here and do this stuff and I'm like kind of torn between erasing the pencil lines at all or just leaving them, because there's sort of an interesting look to that, having the pencil lines still on there. I don't know. What do you guys think? My sketches, see, that's the thing. I do my sketches and they always end up looking clean anyway because I clean them up. And so it's really hard to sort of say that they're sketches when they end up looking as clean and slick and refined as your finished art would look like. I'm just using different tools to kind of get the same effect. Did I ever wish I could go off the rails? Like, yes, like McKeon and Skinkavich, yeah. I mean, it takes guts to do that because you're saying, okay, I'm getting work with his established styles, and there's a certain expectation that of what what you editorially what they're expecting you to turn in, and so it's I think Sienkiewicz went and did like something like Stray Toasters, or what was it called, something like that, because he was very much a Neil Adams clone when he was working on Moon Knight and stuff, and so he went and did this and stuff earlier than that, and then he went and did like Stray Toasters and did, or I think it was Stray Toasters, something like that. Did this really bizarre looking stuff, and then sort of people were kind of like, oh, he's doing that now, and then he kind of brought it back a little bit with a more mainstream look when he came back on that second Moon Knight series, but he was starting to push the envelope with it, right? And then I think he did that graphic novel that, and then Frank Miller came in, right, and did The Dark Knight, which was like, what the heck is that? And I think that sort of set the table for other guys to sort of break out and start really getting weird. Although Sienkiewicz probably predated Dark Knight when he was getting weird. No, I don't think he did, actually, because he ended up doing that Daredevil graphic novel with Frank Miller. Frank Miller wrote it, and Sienkiewicz illustrated it. And his stuff started getting weird. His comic book, regular, normal comic book stuff started getting weird with that. And like I said, he sort of set the table, and then, he gradually got weirder and weirder, and everybody just sort of went along with it. So he did it the right way, rather than just shocking people with suddenly just. And I think you have to develop into that too. I don't think you just wake up one morning and go, okay, I'm going to do something really weird. You get to a point as an artist where you go, I've been doing this for 25 years or 35 years. And although I've tried to get better, I've gotten better doing the same style. You know what I mean? And you're kind of like, I really want to branch out and try something different. So you start working towards that, but you just don't all of a sudden turn on a switch and you're doing, going from Neil Adams to doing something just totally bizarre, like, he's doing now, or unique, maybe a better way to put it. And so I think there's a process of getting to that point where you're actually doing that type of work. But I've never really started the ball rolling in that direction, probably because I never felt like I had accomplished enough to feel comfortable to do that. I always feel like I'm fighting for my next job, which in actuality is true. So you're like, okay, well, people expect this of me. I got to keep doing this, but I'm just going to do it better. So that's kind of the mindset you get into. You never think of, if I went off the rails and did something totally, crazy, it might, might send me to superstardom, or it might ruin my career, so there's always that risk, and with me, when you have a family and you got responsibilities and stuff, you're less risk averse than you are when you're young and, you're only responsible for yourself. Those days are definitely gone. Although as my kids get out of the house, maybe I will start getting weird in my latter half of my career, or latter third of my career. I'm already past the halfway mark, I guess. Excuse me. We shall see. Time will tell. But then then I do something like Kit Carter, and you obviously don't want to do something like Kit Carter, for example, Sienkiewicz style, right? That's not what people want. They want a more traditional look of the cute space girl than they do. If you're doing Batman, you want to push the envelope a little bit. But so I think it also depends on the project you're working on too. And I grew up with traditional painters. So when I paint, I'm more likely to want to emulate them than I am to do, I don't know what influenced Sienkiewicz to go the route he went, if there was, you know, if that was all internal or if there was some sort of external influence that he saw and he was, it was sort of looking at different types of art and said, hey, this is kind of a direction I want to go in. I don't know. But all the stuff that I study, I'm not a fine artist. I don't have a great deal of respect for fine art for the most part. And I'm much more a guy that's going to be looking at Norman Rockwell than I am looking at, Jackson Pollock or something. So it's really difficult for someone like me who doesn't have a real appreciation for that kind of work to sort of go off in that direction. I'm much more likely to, when I paint or something, to do something closer to, a traditional, artist, painter than I am something very abstract and unique. All right, let's see what we got going on here. This is incredibly close to being done. I might throw a couple crows in back over here. Since there was some crows in the witch crows, the crows that were witches. I got to put some white lines in here with my chalk pencil. Got too much uniformity in this hair. It's driving me nuts. See, that's the other weird thing about me. You would think that someone whose work is as slick as mine is would not get super annoyed at uniformity, but I do. It's bizarre. I guess I got to put those. No, I don't have to. I don't really like those lines on her costume and her torso thing. So I don't have to put them in there. I'm the artist, right? I can make a creative decision. Look at me. I'm going off the rails. I'm not following traditional Wonder Woman. Actually, it's not traditional. It's the newer version. I think Jim Lee did, or a take on the newer version. Yes, you're right. My monster stuff, that's one thing. If I did Garbage Man, I could go kind of really get strange with that. By the way, Power Cubed was fantastic. Love the premise. Hope you get to do more someday. Yes, thank you. It was a lot of fun, and it's meant to be a really fun book. The problem is no one bought it. But I don't think it was the correct book to release through Dark Horse either. It was much more of an Image book than or a Marvel book, really. So that may have, I'm sure that it hurt it a little bit, because people don't look at Dark Horse for traditional comic book stuff. And although I don't know if I'd call Power Cube traditional, I mean, it is in the sense in the art style, and it is kind of superhero sensibilities with it, but with a sense of humor. So I might have done better with that at a different publisher, but so I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is I don't know that just because it didn't sell well, it's first time out, that it's something to be abandoned, because I don't think it is. I think it's pretty good, and it's got some potential. but it's trying to pick a project that people are going to buy and respond well to, and still make it something that you want to do, because my traditional likes are not stuff that people generally buy. How many times have people attempted to launch John Carter of Mars and it just continually fails? And I love that stuff, but not enough people do. Everybody says they love it, but not enough people buy it when it comes out, I guess. I mean, most of the comic reading audience, let's face it, is still very much into superheroes, and that's kind of what they've come to know and love over the years, and it's kind of expected. So you have a sort of limited audience for anything other than superheroes, and then it's more than that. It's superheroes in a connected universe, because people like to be part of the bigger picture. It's like you can sell them a story and say, oh, that was a really good story, but where does it go from here? But if you have a connected universe where all these characters interact and one thing leads to another thing, and then pretty soon everybody's involved in it, that I think is, for a regular comic reader, someone that, is like a monthly reader of more than one comic, that stuff, that's really appealing. So it's hard to get bigger numbers on more standalone type projects, or even something like Garbage Man, which, if I did my own universe of stuff, he'd be in it. But if you can look at Man-Thing and Swamp Thing, I mean, they used to cross those guys over a little bit with other characters, but because they're just weird monster books, they don't really fit. It's really hard to cross, Man-Thing over with Captain America, right? So anyway, here we go. That's looking just about done. Could put a background in, but I'm not really sure what I'd put in. I got to put in a couple of crows back here, because I have some dead space. I might as well fill it up. Some kind of wretched, ugly crows. Like, crows aren't already wretched and ugly, but kind of see what I got roughed in there. Alan Moore wrote a great Swamp Thing and Swamp Superman. Well, Alan Moore is a little bit more gifted than a lot of us as a writer. But my point being that even though he wrote a good story where they crossed over, it's not something that occurred a lot, right? Because they just didn't really fit. Superman's not dealing with monsters all the time. There's a place for Swamp Thing. It was a little bit harder with Man-Thing because he didn't actually think. He was just sort of there. Where Swamp Thing actually can contribute a little bit, but the guy lives in a swamp. The Justice League are out in space. But again, that's me being practical again, instead of going beyond that and saying, well, why can't you put Swamp Thing in space? What would be wild about Swamp Thing in space? How do we do it? What would make it really bizarre and cool and interesting? But anyway, I guess my point to all that was that, I do release Garbage Man. I'm still looking at a fairly limited audience for it, regardless of how well it may or may not be done. Let's just assume it's done well for the sake of argument. It's still hard sell because it's a monster book. Monster books have never been, other than the short period there in the early to mid 70s, where they were sort of popular for a while. in the 50s. It seems like monster books get popular when people get tired of superheroes. Then they're looking for something else. But it seems like since mid 70s, maybe latter 70s, that superheroes have kind of rediscovered themselves, and people have not turned back. I mean, they've accepted some Vertigo stuff, but I guess except maybe when Neil Gaiman was writing Vertigo, they had some huge numbers on those books. But for the most part, they never see that kind of interest in a fantasy or a horror book that you do in superheroes in comics. It's just, you just don't. With the exception of the 50s, when movie comics, superheroes got old really fast after World War II was over because they seemed not to be necessary anymore. But then Stan and Jack came along, and Steve Ditko, and sort of made superheroes relevant in a way they hadn't been before. And I think everybody sort of latched onto that formula and keeping that formula. And so, it's lasted. There we go. Look at that. I did all that right before your very eyes. Those of you who hung out with me. It's kind of like a slumber party, right? Where kind of everybody's at their own house. But anyway, so there it is. I think that turned out relatively well. Hopefully Scott will be pleased with that. I could put background in, but I don't know. Put some rando trees back here, but it doesn't really, I don't know if that really adds to anything or not. Yeah, I think I'll call it good. Wait a minute. So what was your pitch that you did for Man-Thing that you never got to do? Okay, it's awesome, quite frankly. Okay, so there's this, and those of you who read Sludge, there was a investigative reporter in there named Shelley Rogers that was basically based on my wife. That was her maiden name. So Marvel owns the copyright of my wife, apparently. But anyway, so I was going to bring her back, right? And she was working on a regular newspaper, but at this point had been sort of, relegated to National Enquirer kind of stuff. And so there was a sighting of some aliens or something out in the south someplace, and so she was down there to check this out, although she knew it was garbage, but that was what she got paid to do. So she gets out there and actually is aliens, and she gets abducted, right? Well, and Man-Thing's out there shambling around in the swamps like he always is, and he gets abducted. So the aliens start probing and messing with his head and his mind, and they activate a consciousness inside him. So Ted Salas's consciousness is activated inside Man-Thing. And so it's kind of like, I don't know if you're familiar with the story Flowers for Algernon. They made a movie called Charlie with, that's his name, won an Academy Award for it. Played Peter Parker's Uncle Ben in Tobey Maguire movies. Can't think of his name. Anyway, Cliff Robertson. So anyway, it was based on a book called Flowers for Algernon, and it's basically about this really slow-witted dumb guy who's a janitor in this scientific facility, and they do an experiment on him, and basically he becomes super intelligent, but it doesn't last, right? And that's kind of this whole premise of Man-Thing. So he gets intelligence and is able to think, still can't speak, but he's able to think and reason as Ted Salas. So it's basically Man-Thing defeating these aliens before they, go back to their home planet and start an invasion or whatever. So he's trapped in the ship, but then he has to rescue this girl, and there's this Beauty and the Beast element thing to it. And of course, at the end, he crashes the ship, saves the day, loses his consciousness. And so here's this woman, the reporter, and he's just at the end shambles off because there's nothing left. And they she figures out there's something going on inside him, and they were communicating and stuff like that. And then, of course, it's all gone by the time the end of the story. So that was kind of the pitch. And Marvel said they would, oh, yeah, we'll do that. And then they just never did. And then an editor over there really ticked me off. And so that's why I left and went to DC. An editor who's no longer there. But I was going to take over, after I finished Ms. Marvel, I was going to take over Ultimate FF. And then I got mad and left. Even though I have good relationships, I think I do with most people that are still there at Marvel that I knew. Although they may be pissed at me for leaving, I don't know. So that's what it looks like on the front. Which actually isn't a bad, just in and of itself. I'm going to flip it over to see the rest of it. All right, coolio. Yes, it was a tragic Man-Thing story, but I actually discussed it with Louise Simonson one time, and she'd be a really, ooh, that's too close on me. She would have been like the perfect person to work on that with. Let's get out of here. There we go. Oh, I don't look any younger, do I? All right. Well, that was kind of a nice impromptu live stream there. We got through an entire drawing. I didn't think I would manage it, but we did. And I didn't stop rambling the whole time. And that's really why you tune in, right? It's for the stories they tell. Anyway, thanks for joining me. I'll be back soon. I might even do 2 more this week, I kind of do these off the cuff. I don't have any sort of regular schedule. So, if you're on Facebook, just be looking for the notification that I might be going live and check it out. Because whatever I'm doing, I'll be drawing something. So anyway, have a good night, everybody. Thanks again for joining. I really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll see you guys next time. Peace out.